This episode is sponsored by Coastal Leather Supply, created by leather crafters for leather crafters, supplying premium leather, tools, and all your other leather working needs. Specialised in vegetable tan leather such as Buttero, Pueblo, and many others. They ship internationally and are trusted in the Australian and New Zealand leather working community. Visit coastalleathersupply.com.au. Welcome back to another episode of the Joseph M. Leather Podcast. In this episode, I talk to Peter Nitz. Peter is based in Zurich, Switzerland, and makes bespoke luxury leather goods for his clients. Each product is unique and is a culmination of hours of craftsmanship. He also teaches students in his atelier and has online leather courses where no matter your skill in leather craft, you can take your first steps in learning how to make luxury leather goods. Welcome, Peter.
Hi, Joseph. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks for your time. So, what got you into leather craft?
Actually, it was just kind of happened. I always enjoyed making stuff ever since I was a little kid, but I never really got serious about arts or crafts or anything like that, just as kind of a hobby. I was doing it. And then I guess it's been about 13 years ago now, I met in Paris an Hermes craftswoman. And I said to her, like, oh, it's so cool. I always wanted to learn how to work with leather, but I never really wanted to start because I didn't know how to do it the right way. And she said, oh, that's great. If you really want to know, I have my holiday in August and I'll come for a week to Zurich and bring some tools and just show you the basics of how to work with leather. So this was, of course, after like a few drinks and everything. I didn't think it would actually happen. People make lots of promises after you've had a few drinks. But she actually did come and showed me all the basics of saddle stitching and edge finishing. And from there, I was beyond hooked. I actually went a bit crazy and knew that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's amazing when you first get into leather work. It's quite daunting at the start, and like because there's so many tools, and you make so many mistakes of buying the wrong tools, and tools break, and then there's leather and which leather to use, and yes,
especially back then, there was no Instagram, there was no references, there weren't like a million other leather workers around, so I literally had to like go to Paris and find an atelier of someone that was working and like find out, okay, what kind of thread is this? Where can you get edge paint or all of those kind of things? The resources out there were extremely limited at that time.
Yeah. So what leather was available to buy? Did you still have the vegetable tan and?
Well, at that time, I was really focused on exotics from the very beginning. So there was a tannery, or there still is a tannery in Switzerland for mainly exotics because they do croc and lizard for watch straps in Switzerland because of the watch industry here. So I was lucky that there was this tannery that would do like one-off skins for me. I didn't have to order like, a big batch of 20 hides. They would just custom dye me single skins. And there was also another like leather reseller here. And at the beginning, I didn't do too much in regular leather, but I did buy some leathers from there. That's basically where I got started here, just locally in Switzerland.
Yeah.
It was only like maybe a year or two later that I first went to Linnea Pella, to the big trade show, to check out and find like where all the big tanneries were and what I could get.
Yeah. So you started straight in exotics, straight off the bat.
Yeah. The first like full big bag I made was like a big crock tote bag.
Wow. That would have been like coming down to like a smooth leather, like, a vegetable tan would have been so much easier, like from working from alligator, because I've never touched it before. I've never used alligator.
It's honestly not that much.
Because
it's not that much different. I mean, you just have to be aware of the scales, the pattern, and the layout, what pieces to use. But otherwise, with the stitching and creasing and gluing and everything, it's not that much different.
So it's not a big thing for the stitches to sink into the
Well, yeah, you never get the stitching as, it's an uneven surface on croc and on exotics, so the stitch doesn't ever lay as perfectly as it would on a smooth veg tan leather, but that's just part of how it is.
Yeah. I heard that you were like reselling luxury bags and as a sort of a side business, and that was sort of one of your ways that you sort of took apart bags and saw how they were constructed. Do older luxury bags, are they different to the newer versions? Like the Hermes bags from like 30 years ago, are they different to...
Yeah, actually the resale business wasn't a side business, that was my actual career.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's what I was doing. So I saw, I had one of the first online resale shops for luxury goods, and I had a shop here in Zurich and in Paris for resale goods. So I saw pretty much every single model, vintage and new, coming through the shops that I could inspect and see how they were constructed and stuff. But I didn't take those apart because I needed to resell them. But I did, if I would find like a completely trashed Kelly bag or some other interesting vintage bag, I would take it apart and see how it was constructed. But as far as your question, whether they're made better older, I would say probably yes. You can see where as time goes on, they need to be making them faster and faster. I also know I do have some inside connections to Hermes, and I know that some of the craftsmen that made Birkins and Kellys, they had many, many hours to complete them like 20 years ago. The one told me they had 35 hours to make a Birkin bag, and currently now they have 13.5 hours to make a Birkin bag. So that's a big difference in what you can do as far as making sure that, your edges are perfectly finished and everything is really precise. And also just aside from that, just from looking at the bags, you can see there are certain things that they skimp on that, to be honest, the end customer doesn't really notice. Let's say the average end customer doesn't really notice, but a professional would and does see it.
Yeah.
So that's
like I feel bad if like my T pockets like are not hand stitched. Like if I'm making a like machine stitched or hand stitched bag, I mean wallet or something like that. If my outside edges are hand stitched, but it's like my T pockets have to be hand stitched because then it's like I'm cutting corners.
I know what you mean.
So yeah, so do they just like machine stitch some areas that aren't seen?
You're talking about Hermes specifically?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that much has changed as far as how much hand stitching or machine stitching they do, because the bags were always mostly machine stitched, even 20, 30 years ago. There's parts that are machine stitched and parts that are hand stitched. So I don't think it's so much about that, but it's a lot. You see a lot of skimping on edge finishing are not so great.
Yeah. Because I was looking at a Kelly bag today, and because they have like the piping down the edges, is a edge painted on the inside, or do they cover it with like a binding?
It depends. Normally they're just edge painted inside. There were some models I've seen in the past that have like a binding inside. Usually it was the ones that have sometimes they did some fabric linings, like they did a series of matte croc bags that had like a canvas toile interior, and those had a binding around the seams inside.
Yeah. So it took you a long time to become full-time in leatherwork, and I know that you mentioned that one of the things in the luxury leather goods is gaining a credibility in that area, and also the psychology of branding. And it's funny because I know you mentioned that you're making a croc bag when you were selling the luxury bags, and your customers would say, just sort of tap you on the shoulder or something like that. But going into that area of luxury leather goods, there's that huge credibility to get. How did you sort of gain that?
Yeah, it just comes very slowly. There's a friend of mine works as a branding consultant. He had his own branding agency, and he was also artistic director or creative director for a couple different major brands. So years ago, I talked to him about this, and he said, you have two ways you can do this. You can either get 20 million and start off with a major marketing campaign, buy your press, get celebrities to carry it, and just really promote it by having a large amount of cash to build the image and the brand and the story. Or you can do it with no money organically. It's just going to take you a long, long, long time. And since I didn't have 20 million sitting around, I had to do it the slow way, the organic way.
Yeah.
So I basically just, I had my other business that was supporting me financially. So I would do that business during the day, and then evenings into the middle of the night, I would be working on my bags and projects. And then it was just a matter of trying to make a good product. So once I got that down and had products I was happy with and liked, then it's just kind of, trying to get the word out there, however you can. I mean, I guess at that time for me, it was Instagram. Also, I had my clients from my other businesses, but as I said, they weren't like so interested because it had, no branding. It was just like, oh, yeah, that's so cute. He's making bags. Yeah, the big break for me happened when someone from French Vogue saw my first collection of bags and really loved them. And then Vogue did a full page feature on me and pictured a bunch of the bags and everything. And that honestly is what gave me credibility. It didn't change anything about the quality of the bags or how they looked or anything, but it for the public, it gave a certain credibility that it's a real brand and they are good. If Vogue is saying it's beautiful and good, then it's good and beautiful. And from there, then, other people heard about. Then Thomas Erber, who does these cabinets of curiosities where he takes different designers, both big and small, and does big kind of group exhibitions in different big shops around the world. He saw it in Vogue and then contacted me, and through that, then I was able to sell at Colette in Paris. And it's just, you kind of got to get in there with your exposure and just keep going, keep rolling with it if you can.
Yeah. Move to Europe, I think. You have that instant credibility. No, Switzerland.
I think actually that's been a disadvantage and an advantage for me.
Okay, yeah.
From early on, of course, when you think of fashion, you think of New York, you think of Paris, you don't think of Zurich, Switzerland.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, a lot of people who liked my bags and who were in the industry said, "Hey, you gotta move to New York, you gotta move to Paris or LA or something like that, because in Switzerland, people may discover you and like you, but then they forget about you because you're not right there. You need to be seen all the time. And if a stylist wants to borrow your bag quickly to use on a celebrity, they're not going to go through the hassle of saying, hey, there's this guy in Switzerland, let's contact him and get him to FedEx us a bag and deal with. No, they want to go run down to the showroom in LA, grab what they need, have it on their celebrity. So for me, it was a bit of a disadvantage being here away from everyone. Plus, a huge part of it is all networking. You want to be friends with the journalists, with the stylists, with the celebrities themselves, whatever. That all can happen much easier when you're in LA or New York or Paris. In Zurich, it's a different ballgame here. So on the one hand, that was a big disadvantage. On the other hand, it was maybe an advantage because it was something different and unique, and there's not a lot of competition here in Switzerland. So maybe I stand out a little bit more because it's different. So yeah, it was important to me to live here in Switzerland. I really like it here. I didn't want to move, so I figured I just have to make it work somehow.
Is Switzerland more famous for like watches and all that? Because I would think Switzerland as a luxury sort of country, so to speak, with good brands and.
No, it does have the main reputation Switzerland has is for quality. So of course we have cheese and chocolate and watches and all that, but it's known for quality. So it's already a really great from a branding perspective. It's really great to have made in Switzerland as part of the brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I had like a consultation with like a business guy, and it was actually quite interesting to get his. Because from a crafter's perspective, you sort of don't really. You do think about the business side of it, but you don't really think that much into it. And I remember I showed him this leather bag, and he asked how much it would cost, and sort of just picked a rough number out of my head, and I was like, 2,000. And he sort of made a similar sort of comparison, because he said that like these luxury brands, they might be selling a bag at that price, and you're just like this new kid, like new guy on the block. They're more inclined to go for that established brand, so sort of getting that. It's good that you got that credibility when you did, because it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, 100%. That's honestly the biggest lesson for me to learn at the beginning, was how much of it has to do with the credibility and the branding part. Because I naively thought that, all I have to do is just make like really great quality, like the best quality product you can imagine, and people are going to be like, buy it because it's so well made and so beautiful. And I very quickly found out that pretty much didn't help at all. That's kind of like something you've got to have already, and no one cares about it. And then you got to like do the branding and promotion, and then have that as the backup to show that the product also is very good.
Yeah, exactly. How did you decide which products to make? Because you don't have a huge means of production of like employees and all that. So how did you narrow down the scope of the products, like of a collection?
Honestly, I just made what I wanted to make at the beginning. When I officially started, I started two different brands. One was Peter Nitz, where I made everything myself by hand. The other brand was called Van Asten, and that was just a made-up name. There I did like a full collection, and I had it produced in a factory and everything like that. So with that brand, there were two of us that ran that brand, and it was supposed to be more like the commercial brand, where we thought about that kind of stuff, like, what's going to be good for the next season, what colors, what models. And then for Peter Nitz, that was really just an outlet for me to make exactly what I wanted to make. It wasn't really originally intended to be like a big brand or something like that. It was more just like, I didn't have to worry about anything. I just made what I wanted to make for that. And then the other part, we thought, the other brand, Van Asten, we thought about like, what the market wanted or what the current trends were. So yeah, from the beginning, the Peter Nitz stuff was just what I felt like making. Yeah.
Do you still have that other brand?
No, we stopped it, kind of like absorbed it together into one 4 or 5 years ago. So obviously we don't do any outside manufacturing for Peter Nitz. It's still made in Switzerland, but I also do corporate gifting. And so that's kind of where the Van Asten part translated into the Peter Nitz corporate gifting thing. So, for companies and stuff, I'll do, I'll make the original pieces in the atelier, and then for production, it's outsourced to a factory.
Okay. So what sort of like corporate gifts, like little coasters or key rings?
Yeah, whatever they want. For example,
or a bit more better. Yeah.
For example, I did one for Bucher, which is a jewelry store that they have jewelry stores all over Europe, and we did I think 3 different items for them. It was a passport wallet, a luggage tag, and a credit card wallet. so small leather goods, and it was gifts that they would give out internally or to VIP customers or as Christmas gifts to clients, things like that. But it can be anything that the companies want.
Yeah. What's your favorite leather? Would that be alligator?
That's such a hard one to say. I actually, I think I really like lizard the most. I don't do that much in lizard because it's also a bit limited since the skins are generally so small and you don't get that many orders for lizard. But I think probably my favorite is lizard. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. Lizard, elephant, and alligator probably come in very close as my top 3 favorites.
Have you used kangaroo before? That was one of my first leathers. I
haven't.
Yeah.
I have a kangaroo skin in my atelier that someone gave me, like, really when I first started working leather, someone gave me a kangaroo skin has the fur on it still. But I've never used it. It's just still rolled up there.
So chrome tan, veg tan versus combination tan in bags. What's your preferred? Because I guess like chrome tan gets a bit of a bad rap in the in the sort
community.
Of main. Yeah, we always like when we learn leathercraft, it's like chrome tan's bad. Like don't use it. But as you sort of when you use like I made a bag out of combination. I made a bag out of Halloween Essex, and that was quite cool because it was a bit supple, but it creased a bit. But then I made a bag out of combination tan, and you definitely see a difference, like how it flex a bit, like how easy it just. Do customers really care about that sort of stuff, or is that just more of a leather community thing?
Well,
they get so hung up on the.
Yeah, they do care. They care in terms not so technical like people in the leather community think about it, but they just care in terms of how it looks and how it feels. And generally, chrome tan is way more popular than veg tan, at least for the high end in the high end luxury market. It just has it's more, let's say, more fashiony or more trendy. You know, the veg tan stuff tends to be in general more classic and traditional. It also usually, if it's box calf or something like that, you know, it scratches easier, gets more of a patina, and a lot of customers today, they want something with a grain. They want something that is resistant to scratches. They don't want to see a patina. I mean, I love all those things. For me, that's part of what leather is and what makes it beautiful. But a lot of people don't want that. So the reason I don't work so much with veg tan is because that's not what people are asking me for. And I don't even say like, hey, would you like this veg tan leather? Would you like this chrome tan? I just show them the different leathers, and they always gravitate towards usually the grained leathers, the soft, supple leathers, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I that's one thing I have thought about. Like, it's the fact that it doesn't age; it just sort of maintains its look. And chrome, you'd have to do a lot more reinforcement with. Is there much of a difference between chrome and combination?
You know, I have been using the combination that I use normally is Nova Napa or Barania leather. And no, there's not like it's really, you feel it's like half chrome and half veg tan. It has a bit of the characteristics of both. It's pretty easy to work with. When I have to work with veg tan, it's always, the biggest trouble is always when you want to skive or with a machine or something like that, because it's always so much harder to do. Like takes so much more power from the machine. But the nice thing about veg tan is you can really work precisely with it, because it usually is, the structure is so tight and firm. You can crease perfectly, you know, you can stitch perfectly, you can, you know, you cut something and it's staying exactly, those panels are exactly in the same shape. And chrome tan, it's always moving around a little bit. Of course, you have more room for
like
for
beveling.
air. Yeah.
A bevel just goes like straight through a veg tan.
Yeah.
What is the difference between the Nova Nappa and the Baronil? Because I've thought about getting some of that Baronil. Is there much of and there's like always like a description comparing the two.
Well,
is one better in certain cases, or?
Well, Nova Nappa is from Tannery Haas. Baronil is from Degerman, and now they have joined together as one company. So I suspect there isn't much of a difference really anyway. It was just two different. I mean, I don't know like the official inside technical details, but from what I understand, you know, each tannery has their own formula for how they produce it, and so I'm sure at Tannery Haas, their Nova Nappa has one formula, and at Degerman, the Baronil has a very, very similar formula. So there wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I've used both. There, of course, are some slight differences, but nothing major. Even within, you know, Tannery Haas has many different variations on their Nova Nappa anyway. Yeah, it doesn't make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Hermes used them both in the past and called them all Barania leather. So, you know, they didn't differentiate.
Yeah.
Differentiate it at a retail end.
Yeah, because that's where I saw it. Like I heard about it, and then I remember I did see it on a Hermes bag. So, that's a nice leather. But then, it looks really nice. But then, you don't want to like. Yeah. Does it scratch? It looks like it scratches a bit.
Yeah, but that's, you know, it's one of those things that the first scratch is painful, and then after a while, you don't even see them anymore, and they all blend together, and it's really, really beautiful. And you know, you're always afraid that if it gets scratched, it's going to look trashy, but actually, it doesn't at all. It looks fantastic.
What's the maximum thickness you'd go with a bag, like for a main panel?
2.4.
When I was because I was looking at getting some, and I think they didn't have I went to the tannery and emailed them, and they said it was like 2 to 2.2 or 2.4 or whatever. And because I don't have like a splitter to like stick it through, it's like, oh, would that be too thick for it? So that'd be fine for an inside out bag.
Sure, yeah. That's the max.
Okay.
The max I would go for that.
Yeah.
There's always the trade-off, you know, the thicker it is, the more beautiful it's going to look. The way it like moves and sinks and wears, it just looks a bit more luxurious. But then, of course, you've got the weight to it, so you can split it a lot thinner. But then it has a different hand to it and a different look. It just depends on what your project is and what you want it to look like.
Do you have to do less reinforcements then, like the thicker it is?
Sure. Well, again, it depends on how you want it to look in the end. I mean, I'll still even use, if it's for certain things, if it's a briefcase and, you know, you're using the full 2.2 or 2.4 thickness, I'll still do a reinforcement in some parts of it, because even with that thickness, it still isn't stiff. It still needs some sort of structure inside to keep a shape, if that's what the client wants. If they want it to keep its form, or whether they want it to be like a completely soft structured bag. But
with gussets, would have to, if you did a briefcase, the gussets they have to be like thinner compared to the main panel.
A lot thinner,
So with like linings, because you're quite limited on linings. Especially on bigger bags, do you sort of like, are you more of like a canvas lining or
never
leather?
Always goatskin. Goatskin, or occasionally I use calf. If I do my terrazzo calf as a lining, then I use calf, but otherwise it's all goatskin. Yeah.
But how do you get it on like a bigger bag though? Like if you
splice it together. In fact, I just got my latest tutorial back from editing, and it's on splicing. So, and in it, I show you how to splice large panels together, so you can do a goatskin lining on a big bag.
Oh, I'll have to buy that because I made a duffel. I'll show you this little duffel bag, and I did it on goat skin, but obviously it wasn't enough. Like I couldn't fit it all in, so I'm not sure if you did. Get my phone. I had to improvise the top.
Okay. You added an extension.
So I added like so where the goat skin meets there, and like another piece, and then I just like stuck a piece and like another separate goat skin.
Sometimes you have to get creative.
But I hand stitched all that, and that took ages. And then after that, I was like, I need a sewing machine. So.
And did you like the sewing machine?
I made a bag that had a canvas. Yeah. The only thing is it's so annoying when if you set the tension correctly, but then if you drop to a thinner leather, the tension gets like whacked out. So when I did this bag with a canvas lining, the tension was completely out. Like you could see the knot at the top. Right. So when I'd go to the lining, it would but it was like a practice bag to get better and all that. So yeah. Actually, I'll ask you on this before I forget. So one of the things, because I like the when the zipper goes straight to the end. Do you have to have like a piece of leather that, like, how does the zipper go to the end? Do you have to have this separate piece of leather further down where it connects to the piping, or?
I can't see it so well. Do you have a piece of leather there on the end?
Yeah, I have a piece of leather, but it sort of...
Okay.
I stitched it pretty badly.
Yeah. I mean, you don't need to put any leather at the end. If you want it to go further down, then you can just run the zipper all the way through to the piping.
But won't there be like a gap for it to pop up? So you'd run the zipper straight. So
yeah, well, you need to leave a little bit. This is a tricky calculation. I have it on my Nui duffel the same. You need to leave just enough tape that when you do the flip of the bag, that it has enough that when you hammer it on the piping and everything, that the tape can fold over, and then the zipper starts laying flat.
Okay. So you have like a little bit of leather before the...
There's no leather. There's no leather at the end. There's no leather tab.
Okay.
The zipper tape just goes directly in. In fact, the leather is going to make it more difficult to bend and flip around there. If you have just the tape, then it's very thin and it can fold over on itself really easily.
Okay. So you don't... Do you have to continue, like, because you break all the teeth off of it, do you have to continue, like, where do you tuck in that tape?
It just gets sewn right into the seam, just like, just right in along the piping. What I do put a piece of leather on the back side. If you're looking in, if you have the bag inside out, and you have, let's say, the gusset panel, the piping, and then you have the front and back panels with your zipper tape coming right here. On the back side of that zipper tape, you need to put a little piece of leather because you want to, first of all, you're using the awl. You don't want to cut into the zipper tape and just have it raw so it can fray. You want to have a piece of leather glued to the back so you have something really like stable that you can stitch it down to. And then when you flip it inside out, it has that leather behind it and the leather from the gusset and the piping all together, and that holds it in place. The only tricky thing is just getting that exact calculation. That depends on your pattern and how big your piping is and all that. You have to do a test so that when you flip it and hammer it down, that the zipper is really like, you know, it's not bowing up and then going down. It really bends over, and then the metal starts and going straight.
Yeah, wow. Because that bag originally had like 2 zippers with 2 zipper stops, and when I flipped it inside out, the zipper stops just went like flung off, and then one zipper came off. So
yeah,
I'm stuck with the one zip.
That's the absolute worst and the most nerve-wracking part, because you have to, that zipper end stop has to be tight enough that it's not going to pop off when you flip it or slide down further, but it can't be so tight that you're cutting into the fabric and then the fabric rips. It's really a tricky balance to get the exact tension on that.
And because the bottom's reinforced with like thick veg tan, so I'm not sure if that just made it easier to ping the zipper stops off as it came through.
Yeah, the harder the bag is to flip, the more pressure goes right on the end of those. You got to be like really, really, really careful with that.
But it's easier. It's hard for you to explain it, but I guess if I saw it, it would make a lot more sense.
Yeah, this isn't the best format to explain. Some techniques.
Well, at least I know that you don't need a piece of leather there. You can run the zipper to the end. It's just the other part that is the part I'll have to listen to it to re-listen to it to try and get it.
You can also watch the Nui Duffel tutorial. I show it all in there.
Yes, all that.
Also, the difference is
I need to do that.
If you want the zipper to like literally unzip to the end, then it also makes a difference what zipper you use. For example, if you use a YKK zipper, their end stops are bigger, so the slider always stops against the end piece. And Riri, their end stops are smaller, and the slider slides back over on top of, like, it actually goes into it. So that also makes a difference, depending on what you want.
If I had my other bag with me, I have 3 bags that I've made. 2 of them, the zipper stops all came off, and one of them, the zipper stop actually came on, and I don't actually stayed on it. I don't have it with me, so I can't check. But Riri runs. They're so little. The stoppers, like they're so tight. Do you prefer Riri, or the Excellier? Is there a
YKK,
pro and cons between the two?
Yeah, they're very, very similar. They're both really good. I use Riri because it's very convenient for me. Being made in Switzerland, I have them right here. But YKK is also great. They just have a slightly different feel to them. But they're both really good.
I know you'd think it'd be easy to find zippers, but like it's so hard to. A solid.
Yeah, I think here, when I started my online shop, I was very excited to sell Riri Symmetrical Zippers, so their high-end zipper. And I thought, because you couldn't buy them anywhere online, it was like impossible to find. And I thought they would sell like crazy. I sell some, but not tons. And I realized most people just don't want to pay the price for the expensive ones. That's why you can buy the normal Riri metal zipper everywhere, the basic one. You can find it anywhere online, but I guess that's the reason why you don't find the symmetrical one online, is just because in the end, most people are happy with the less expensive one. I always assume everyone wants the very best quality of everything, but not everyone actually is, or wants to pay for it, or can pay for it. So,
and that's the thing with zippers as well. Is they're so finicky as well. Like you have to make sure they're like a nicely set zipper is beautiful. But then if you ruin it, like I've done with my 2 bags here, it's like, oh, I just wasted all this money buying like these stoppers that I've like bent in place. So what's those ones? I've never heard of them. I thought the normal Riri ones were the
normal Riri
ones.
The normal Riri model is called Metal. The high-end version is called Symmetrica. They also have another one, high-end one called Star. It's very, very beautiful. It's a little bit tighter to open and close, and it's a little bit sharp sometimes, but it's very decorative and very beautiful. But the classic one that looks very similar to the YKK Excella is the Riri Symmetrica. Those are the ones. The only one I sell on my website is the Symmetrica one.
And that's and those ones go over the zipper, the stop. So
yes,
the same ones.
If you have if you have the slider, it slides over the end stop.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's actually like a good trick I use to make sure it's down tight enough is because if it doesn't slide over, then you haven't squeezed the prongs together enough, and so I try and get it squeezed down just enough that the slider fits right over it.
Okay. That doesn't matter. That doesn't make a huge. You still put the zipper stop in the same place, regardless of if it's Y, KK, or Riri. When you make that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just a little thing to
it's just whether when you open it, you want the zipper to stop in front of the stop, or if you want it to slide over. Honestly, almost no one. I don't think anyone has ever noticed that, unless you're actually making or installing zippers yourself. No one sees that.
Yeah. How do natural reinforcements, canvas/leather, compare to synthetics?
For reinforcement?
Like Salpa.
Material?
Yeah, like I've never used Salpa before.
What do you use?
I've just used... What have I used? I've used, like, cotton or linen. When I made those, that duffel bag, that sort of carry-on sort of bag, I didn't use any for the combination tan.
What were you using reinforcement for? What effect were you trying to get with it?
I just mean in general. So, like with stretch resistance,
mm-hmm.
is there different types of reinforcements you would use for like a duffel like this compared to obviously like you wouldn't use Salpa for like a
right? No, with something like that, I would use Salpa or bonded leather in the upper part. Just as to give it some structure, exactly like the first maybe 6 or 7 centimeters down from the zipper, that whole section would get a reinforcement so that because the bag needs it needs a little bit of structure. Yeah. Also, after you're carrying it for a while, there's about this much leather sticking up past where the handles attach. That part will start to fold in. Yeah. If you don't have a reinforcement there and you want it to kind of stay up to keep a nice silhouette.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, yeah, okay. But yeah, this is reinforced with like thick, like some leather down the bottom. It's probably a bit too long. But if you don't need it, do you have to, like, if you use like a combination, a chrome tan, do you have to use like a polyester or whatever across the whole thing to stop it stretching?
No, I mean, I wouldn't use on like a big leather. If I have the full thickness, I don't use anything on the back to keep it. It shouldn't stretch really.
No. Yeah. Okay. Could you use Salpa as a? This is my knowledge, as you can see, in this sort of area. Can you use it for a base, or is that?
Sure. Okay. Sometimes I use like multiple layers of it as a base. I mean, we use kind of interchangeably box calf leather and Salpa as our reinforcements. It also depends on whether, like for example, on places where the edge will be exposed, it's easier to use a box calf reinforcement because you're going to have an easier time finishing the edge. The natural leather is going to take the edge paint easier than if you have a layer of Salpa in between there. Sometimes the edge paint doesn't stick as well to it. It's harder to get an edge at the beginning going. So those are, I think, for us the main differentiation or the main different reasons why we'd use one or the other. But we use them interchangeably. The one thing we would never use is like Texon or something like that. I would never. That stuff is trash, in my opinion.
So that it doesn't really make a big difference. Like the longevity of the leather base compared to the Salpa base is sort of not a huge.
No, the thing is, oftentimes
you
can get it a bit stiffer. If you're using Salpa, you can get different stiffnesses, and maybe the veg tan leather you're using can be quite heavy and thicker, and you can't get it as stiff as you want it. So, yeah, a lot of times it has to do with what your needs are for it. If you need it to, if you need it to be really, really stiff, sometimes a natural leather you can't do it with that.
Yeah. So with those handles, when you make, what's the reinforcement you put in the middle?
A leather cord.
Oh no, the do you use like a reinforcement for the handles?
You mean glued to the leather?
Yeah.
Yeah, we use either
Okay.
salpa or box calf. Like I said, I think we often use box calf. In the tutorials, I use salpa. Now we use a lot of box calf just because it's just easier to finish the edges. The edge paint sticks better to the box calf leather.
Yeah.
It's a bit more work because you got to
Okay.
prepare. You got to prepare the surface of the box calf. You got to sand it so that it adheres to the exterior leather and all that. With the salpa, you can just glue in.
What's box calf? Is that just a leather you can buy online?
Veg tan leather. It's just a type of leather that's like a very very traditional leather. It's usually kind of has a semi shiny or like a satin finish surface.
Yeah.
Completely smooth calf leather.
Yeah. So yeah, it's amazing because when these are like the little things that you can't find on YouTube. Like you can find how to make a minimalist wallet, but then when you get down to these like nitty gritty, like the reinforcements is like, whoa, that's so many things I would not have expected.
Well, a bag lives entirely from its reinforcements, and shockingly, especially a lot of big brands as well, don't understand anything about reinforcements, and how the bags are made is horrific. As far as internally, like maybe it looks really nice on the shelf and it's presented well, but how it's going to live after a while it's going to collapse and not look good because the technician who designed it, the production has no idea about reinforcements.
Yeah, I'll show you this bag quickly that I made because I want to. Because now we're talking about reinforcements. Because I noticed that when I was first using this bag, it was quite good, but then over time, it's sort of gotten a bit shaggy. So I was just wondering if I have done something wrong since we're talking about reinforcements. So it's made out of combination tan, and like you probably can't. Anyway, it's meant to stay straight up. But I noticed that when I use it, it sort of pulls up like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
now, is that a craftsman's error?
Well, what you should do is have a reinforcement, like a non-stretch tape or a non-rip tape. Kind of have a strip of that gets stitched behind the patches that run the length of the bag, and the end of it gets stitched into the bottom of the bag, so that right now when you carry that bag, all the pressure is right where those patches are. Everything is hanging off those patches. But if you run the non-stretch strips down there, whether it's tape or you can also find some very thin canvas straps, and stitch that behind there and then into the bottom of the bag, then all of the weight from the handles is supported from the base and not pulling actually right where the handles attach.
So sort of like that thick.
Exactly. Just a strip that runs straight down. So it's only stitched where the patch is, and then stitched in the bottom seam of the bag, and that supports all the weight of the bag.
So it gets stitched into the with the piping?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And to stop it sagging, that would help that.
Yeah, I mean then it won't pull up. It won't make this like sagging effect.
Yeah. How did you learn all this? Like, was it just trial and error, or
taking bags apart?
Yeah.
Taking bags apart and seeing what was inside.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, because I've previously always thought like reinforcement, it ruins the piece because you have to put all this stuff in and you're sort of trying to prop up the bag instead of just letting it. But I think after this conversation, you've definitely changed it because I've walked with it and it's like, man, it looks so ugly when I walk past a shop front and it's like, what is this? Like, I've spent all this time and it just isn't. Wow.
No, reinforcements is a really fascinating topic because you can control so many fine details about a bag can be controlled by how the interior reinforcements are crafted or sculpted. Like, there's so much going on. I also learned so much more since Julien, my craftsman, started working at Peter Nitz. You know, he worked at Hermes for 5 years. And so he made some of the more complicated bags there. And so, of course, he brought with him lots of good information for, like, really detailed technical things about reinforcements and interior skivings and all that kind of stuff. That's really amazing. It's, for me, that's one of the most fascinating parts, is how to do all the construction inside the bag that no one sees, because it really has such a dramatic effect on the outside of the bag once it's done, and no one knows it's there.
I couldn't agree more now. Yeah, it's wow, that's remarkable. Good quality is so accessible today. Like, what makes luxury goods stand out?
Yeah, that's true. Even some really more inexpensive leathers are made so well that they look really, really good. So there's lots of options for leather out there. So what makes something stand out is just going to be obviously the craftsmanship. But for me, the biggest thing is proportions. It's proportions on a bag are everything. And you see a lot of bags out there that could be nice, but the proportions are off. Like the handles are too long or too thick. Yeah, but that's something you either see or you don't see. So proportions for me is something really major that makes something stand out to me, whether it's good or not.
So I guess, why did you decide to teach, and a bit about your online courses?
I decided to teach because so many people kept asking me if I could teach. They wanted to learn how, and there weren't really any good options out there unless you spoke French and could go to a French school. There was pretty much nowhere else in the world where you could learn this style of, French luxury leatherworking. You can go to Florence and learn there, but that's also a completely different style of leatherworking and not as elevated technically as the French way of doing it. So I basically just started because there was the demand for it and people wanted it. It also helped supplement my income while I was building up the brand, because it takes a long, long time until you can live from selling your own brand. It takes a while until it catches on. Exactly. So, and then the tutorials just stemmed from that, because of course it's expensive to come train with me. And there were a lot of people that either couldn't afford or didn't have the time to take off of work, or they weren't able to travel because of any number of reasons. They have families, whatever. So I thought tutorials would be a good way that people could access this knowledge from home without having to travel or have huge expenses.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. I'll have to look at that newly duffel bag one, that's for sure. Get that zippered.
That's a good one. There's a lot of stuff in that, because we go from the beginning to the end of making a complete bag, so you get everything in there, from reinforcements and piping and all kinds of handles, and there's all kinds of stuff in there.
Do you do the reinforcement for the top 6 centimeters, or?
Yep. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Actually,
okay.
Awesome. I think we don't that one. I don't go over how to make the handles, because that's a separate tutorial. And if you're making the new duffel, you should already know how to make handles, because it's a pretty advanced project. But all the reinforcements and stuff, I go into detail in that.
Okay. No, awesome. No, thanks for your time, Peter. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for having me.